G'day, guys. G'day, Europe, and general Eurasia. This is sort of, just another live stream within the this region. I will be doing this month two, so this one and another one in the middle of the month. So just to sort of catch up with people from the British Isles right through to Japan, basically, and to the eastern part of Australia. Currently, it's 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and g'day both of yous, and anyone else. There's about 5. I was expecting a bit more. Aren't you guys at home? You're supposed to be isolating. What the fuck? Should be out entertaining yourselves, on a Saturday night or in Australia, or midday in the UK, or unless you've gone out hunting for food, maybe, possibly. Yeah, I was basically. I've got a new camera that I've been trying to sort of set up properly and all that. It's just, actually my whole StreamYard sort of froze and wouldn't accept any camera or any audio. So yeah, bit of a last minute sort of piss farting around trying to sort it all out. Let alone I was trying to upload something else and it failed. It's about the corona, some strategies, some of the issues and relating to it. So right after this, I'll attempt to upload it and get it on. So there will be something available right after this. So yeah, good to see a few regular faces and a few not so regular faces. Helmut, good to see you, mate. Oh well, it's one way of saying it. Yes. Yeah, look, the thing that actually has the most positive keto, sort of a more catabolic type state. You can't be in it continuously. Does have some positive effects on telomere length. Fasting probably has the most out of anything you can do, is probably fasting. But but beyond that, I mean, a ketogenic diet tends to push up the pathways that are beneficial for both mitochondria and both for telomeres and stuff like that. But telomeres actually vary. I mean, yes, over time they will reduce, the ability for the body to repair the assaults that it actually gets. That's it. It definitely does. Will depend on a lot of factors, environmental factors, what you're exposed to, environmental toxins, mold in the home. There's all sorts of things that are an assault on the body. And probably I mean, you've known me, I've been promoting fasting from day dot. That you should basically, this pulsatile effect of fasting and refeeding sort of through your life, sort of within my own sort of background faith and all that. Greek Orthodox faith has a 200-day of fasting per year, so that helps quite a bit. People don't practice it like they used to. They tend to now try to have like a big meal at one point in the daytime and then sort of not have anything or something very light. So then people don't practice it the way they used to. Let's put it that way. But even some time restricted feeding does have a benefit as well. So it's a lot of factors. There are certain things like that can enhance sirtuin pathways. But as I said, one of the key ones is one thing that over time will happen is your NAD plus levels will decline, and your NADH levels will increase. I mean, usually it's like NAD in brackets phosphate plus, but we just ignore that just to simplify the terminology. But a buildup of hydrogen, can be an issue over time, and not being able to recycle those electrons back to facilitate more NAD plus, means that the body can't generate enough energy sufficient, sort of blue light exposure. And talking about blue light, why am I not wearing my glasses? That's what I forgot with all this sort of trying to give you a sec. Get the blue blocking glasses on. I'm forgetting myself. But I've been, trying to make this other video, and I had a freaking failed, and then my audio was failing, and my new camera was not working. It was just one after the other. So I'm forgetting most things. I just got a meal in. I was literally forcing, 250 grams of raw cured meats down my throat before I got online. That's how, it's just been trying to get this done, trying to get that done. Crazy. Anyway, what's new in my life? But at the end of that plays a big role in terms of, your energy production declines with age, and really NAD plus plays a big role. There are a number of ways you can actually increase it. There's nicotinic riboside, there's MN and other things like that people sort of recommend. I don't. I don't think they actually work as well. And I think that because these, it's not merely the telomeres. Energy plays a big role in how telomeres, how your DNA recycles itself, how cells recycle themselves. All these things require energy. Detoxing, the redox potential. Detoxing requires energy. It all fundamentally comes down to energy, guys. And as that declines with age, you pay the cost of deterioration, not enough energy to basically repair. It's a struggle between repair and damage, and damage always wins in the end, unfortunately. You can retard it slightly, which is important. And that's basically, I've been using nicotinic acid. Which I consider, it gives you the hot flushes and all that, but I consider that far more potent as a recycle of NAD+. So a lot of people out there in longevity sort of promote these other, but I go, nah, that's shit. It doesn't work as well. It doesn't absorb as well. There's a whole lot of issues related to it. It's for another time, another discussion. But nicotinic acid is the one that eventually all these turn into. And then go on from there. So NA is the most important. That's what I've used for ages. Or eat foods that are high in NA, in B3, basically niacin. So that's really what the body wants to support those energy pathways. But anyway, let's move on. Good morning from the States. Yeah, it would be bloody early there, Thomas. Fucking hell, mate, on the East Coast. I'm fine, mate. I'm still with a living. I've sort of moved home. You're welcome, Helmet. Just getting back to the other one. I've moved home, and I'll be working from home from now on. So that'll be interesting. Remotely connecting to work and trying to get stuff and all that. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how things sort of play out with this, with work and stuff like that. Luckily, I don't have any job security insecurity issues, thankfully. But then again, there are issues with basically getting stuff done and all that. So it's going to be a bit of a nightmare until we figure out how to best do those sort of things. Even for my mapping type activities. I had to download through sort of Esri a sort of a license, a local license. So I had to take off the actual server a local license as a method. You actually run a sort of process, and so it allows me then to actually use a localized license at home. That's going to be interesting to see how, because we're going to be fiddling around setting stuff between each other, changing certain INI files and editing so things can work at this end, and then I can basically send the work back to be incorporated in the database to someone that's at work. So, and I don't know how long that's going to last. So it's going to be bloody interesting to see how it all plays out. Anyway, fun and games. Nicotine. Well, yeah, there is supplements. I get one from a pharmacy. There's only one pharmacy in Hobart that actually sells it, and it's specifically for people with cardiovascular issues and all that. So it's a hassle, because I've got a pre-existing condition, I can use that to get it. It's not always, you sort of have to get by prescription in some cases. It's nice, and it gives you hot flushes and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's a bit like that. Kitty's up early. God. Out hunting. Good morning, mate. Good to see you. It's 8:11 p.m. on the east coast of Australia, where I'm at. So, fun and games. Any questions, guys? I've been fiddling around. Right after this, there will be I'll be uploading a new vid on the coronavirus and a couple of other things about some strategies, some things that I've been thinking about, certain things that people may be taking that could be an issue. So I hope people get something out of it. Good to hear. I mean, what time is it at your place? No, I've actually got it. I haven't edited it, so I'm at fault. Bart actually provided me with a video, the whole lot. I just haven't had, with all this corona stuff and being happening and a whole lot of other issues, I've been struggling to organize myself at work and doing overtime and stuff like that, trying to get everything prepared for me to work from home. And other people, like, there's only a floor of 50 odd people. There's only about 6 or 7 people left behind. So we've been so busy trying to move people home to work from home and set up all the computer systems and for people to take licenses, because we've got like server licenses that are allocated, so we have to basically provide like a special scripts to basically where you run in order to take a license from the actual server itself temporarily. You put it on your system in a file, and that is your license. So when you get back to the office, you'll hand it back to the server. So that's, a lot of complicated, IT work that had to happen in order for all this to be able to become possible. So, it's been crazy. So I will be editing it sometime this week. And once I edit it, I will basically provide it back to Bart, and he will release it. So, because it was on his that we did the chat and all that. And in a future date, I will release the entire on mine, but I'll leave that for later on, since he was the one that, so did the initial recording. So in that regard, he should get the benefit from it. And I don't live off YouTube revenues. I live off my own sweat in that regard. I mean, not that I'm saying that people are not working on YouTube, but I'm saying I don't rely on that for my income. And if I can help Bart, that's what I prefer to do in that regard. Yep. Yeah, look, weekends are like that even for me. I usually get up late on weekends, Sundays, and, I'm always struggling to get up to see Pims, and Pims sort of moved her hour even further back, which makes it really damn hard. There'll be I can't remember which LD, because remember there were two. There was the methane one, and there was a methane one, and there was also the other one, which was on that tribe that consumed a lot of meat and those sort of things. So inflammation, but wasn't affecting them health wise, and the reasons for it and all that. So that's quite interesting. But I will actually discuss that at a later stage. So I want to go into greater depth to it that I didn't go into the chat. So first you get from Bart, you'll see that, and then after that, then I'll go over, because there's a few other things that I've thought about to nuance it a bit better at a future time. And Kitty's asking, I know I need to do autophagy to lose extra skin, like water fasting, but is there more than that will help? Yep, nicotinic acid really helps, which is niacin. It does give you hot flushes and all that, but it does help. MK4 also helps with skin in that regard. So does retinol. So basically, the fat-soluble vitamins help a lot. Plus, niacin has a very beneficial effect on skin tone and elasticity and stuff like that. So, yep, you can combine that. The question is trying to get niacin is the issue. And then consume it only with food, because you'll be scratching yourself like hell, because it gives you these hot flushes, and it's interesting. Let's put it that way. Yes, you'll have those claws out. You'll be clawing like mad if you have it on an empty stomach. Believe me, I've done something crazy like that first time, and that was the last time. After that, it was only with food. Dominique, I have been a carnivore for 6 months or so. I've eaten greens twice. I reacted badly. Look, a lot of people do. There's a couple of issues. You could either be susceptible to oxalates or some of the anti-nutrients, or you could be just your microbiome has changed so radically. And so that's another issue. I find, because I incorporate a certain level of dairy, that if I cheat with some plants, I don't get any reactivity. But then it could be just me, So my Mediterranean genes could be playing a role as well. So don't know, because see, I've got really good conversions of LA and ALA, which a lot of people don't. So if you're getting those sort of PUFAs from plants, you may have issues. There could be so many factors. Body stopped digesting over a few days. It all came back up. Does this happen to others? I have heard it happening to others as well, that for different reasons of reactivity. There are variations. It just means that some people are more sensitive. I find that when I chat with people from Northern Europe, they tend to have greater sensitivity. From Southern Europe, less. Parts of Asia, very, very little. They can sort of mix and match and move back and forward with far less problems. Genetics does play a role. Let's be honest. Is a big factor. And if your ancestors have been consuming certain foods for a very long time, you're not going to have the genetics to basically deal with certain things. It's like a lot of Northern Europeans have salicylate issues. They start trying avocados and start trying things like, coconut. And they go, oh, this is not reacting very nice with me. Salicylate sensitivity. A lot of Northern Europeans have it. Southern Europeans don't. I could be dousing down coconut and avocados like that until the forever, and not have very little reactivity in that regard. So yeah, I've known a lot of people who've basically found that one of the key elements is salicylates. But whether it's that a factor for you, I don't know. you'd have to test for salicylate sensitivity. Yeah, can't really think of anything beyond that. I mean, the general stuff is, things like that we've known, the classical stuff, too much gluten, certain lectins, those things, oxalates and all that. But I come across that some people have much greater reactivity, because those sort of other foods, even though they're not optimal and we don't really function really well with them, people tend to not, respond as violently. But salicylates is a different ball game altogether. There, a lot of Northern Europeans do not have, any sort of genetic sort of capacity to deal with them as effectively as Southern Europeans or Southeast Asians, and or people in the Pacific, where coconut is consumed quite a bit. So that could be a big factor that I've come across for a lot of people. But whether it's an issue for you, mate, I don't know. You'd have to really check on that one. Any other questions, guys? That you're welcome, mate. Still hasn't come up on. I've noticed here, but it's hasn't come up on here yet, which is annoying. Some spices mixes will hurt me so badly. I'm in tears. Nightshades hurt me. Yep. A lot of the nightshades tend to also have, some of them have salicylates as well. So it may be a salicylate issue rather than some of the classical lectin issues. Because I've known where people have said, I've taken the skin off, I've got rid of the all the actual seeds out of the tomato, but I'm still having some reactivity. What the bloody hell is going on? You may have a salicylate sensitivity. So, that's a possibility. I would love to actually put those comments right on here, but StreamYard is damn slow as buggery. It's this issue that we've been having, a lot of us that have been, so, which is a pain in the rear end. Oh, look, off the top of my head, I don't remember all of them. Some of the nightshades are. I know avocados have salicylates. I know coconut has salicylates. I believe palm oil products, not the oil, but the other products, palm products tend to have as well. But yeah, there's quite an extensive list. I just can't think of all of them at this stage. You can Google and find out which they are, but it's sort of something that hasn't been traditionally the diet of Northern Europeans and central to Northern, so it is an issue that I've come across multiple times. Good morning, Jenny. It's bloody early. Birds woke me up. Oh, so that's your excuse. Oh, I've got out of bed and then I decided to check YouTube. That's good. That's okay. I'm just kidding. Good to see you. Sort of having to look over there as well, because it's StreamYard still playing up the amount of issues that we're getting. My upload seems to have improved with StreamYard for now. I suspect the audio is coming through pretty good and the video is coming through pretty good. I am running it at 720p, so it's in high def, and I'm not really getting any problems. So the only thing is with the actual chat, is where the problem lies, and I don't know why that's not responding as well. Whatever works for you. uh, just remember in those early hours in the morning, blue blocking glasses. Get some. Don't put your circadian rhythms out of whack. For me, that might be a problem. Not all nightshades hurt me. Not excited about figuring out. Yeah, I'm half German, so that makes sense. Yeah, northern, Germanic, tend to have all these sort of issues with salicylates. So, yeah, I just say to people, whether because I've got friends that are German background, I say, well, why are you eating, these sort of foods? I mean, God, good German sausage, bloody hell, I love German sausages. I usually buy quite a few from a German retailer in Salamanca. So, and then there's another guy that also sells, sort of other type of general products from Germany, which is really nice. So, animal-based products I'm talking about. They do sell other things as well, but so it's nice to get that sort of stuff. There's not much Hungarian stuff. That's always a bit hard to get Hungarian, like, Hungarian cured meats and sausages and stuff like that. So that's always a bit of a hassle in Hobart. But, what can you do? Too far away from Europe. And it's not a big enough market, unfortunately. It's what they put in. See, a lot of them, they will put in. I mean, I just had some beer sticks, and the only thing they have in those is basically salt and pepper, and it's just a lot of salt is in them actually, and it's just cured meats, just salted and raw, nothing else in it. No, I mean, you can buy other variations. Not the beer stick, but they have other names for them that have got other things like tomato juice and all sorts of things in them. I just avoid all that. It's a waste of extra money. Plus, you're basically consuming high quality animal foods with anti-nutrients. Why would you do that? So, but people, I mean, if salt and pepper's not enough for you, God, how much flavor do you need? Yeah, I don't really give a shit about the coronavirus. Yeah, I did mention it earlier. I've done a video on some of strategies to protect yourselves, and some of the issues around it and some of the misinformation and stuff like that. I mean, Bart did one earlier today and pretty much covered. I actually had downloaded that study, so I didn't really go into it. I just quickly showed it. I said, that Bart's already discussed it, showing the actual, but I showed some other evidence of the actual virus itself. I didn't really get into it beyond that point. I sort of was focused more on things that can inhibit the angiotensin recycling enzyme 2, which is a pathway the virus uses to basically get into your lung cells and cause havoc. And some strategies, things that I've mentioned before, but some additional stuff as well, just to reinforce some of the older stuff. Not that I want to sound like a broken record, but then, add a couple of additional things, and one study on some, herbs and certain plants that actually, I've always said, plants are for medicine, that's their purpose, that inhibit this pathway and actually are protective in that regard. And I know it is a non-peer-reviewed study by Stanford and an academic out of Hong Kong University, but there is good information, related information that they've looked into. If anybody wants the actual study, I will have to email it to them because the way I came across it wasn't on the standard, sort of available source. So yeah, but at the end of the day, I've pointed out which of the herbs, which ones I consider better to use, and some of the other benefits they may have. So hopefully that will be of some interest to a lot of people. That will basically be that I will upload that because I've been having problems trying to set things up. That will get uploaded right after this. So it will happen today, later tonight, before I go to bed. Right, all talking is freaking me out. I'm getting out of bed to make some bacon. Good. That's a good source of niacin as well. Good for your NAD plus. Good for your redox potential. Read and your energy. Good to hear, mate. How are you, Henry? Any other questions, boys and girls? That's another one of Bart's. Copying, plagiarizing. Damn. You better not hear about it from any of you. I'll have to plagiarize one of Frankie's just to annoy him. Nah, I don't want to act like an idiotic vegan. He enjoys doing those play roles. Not me. I wish I could do the witch like Bart does. He's impressive. I'm actually in bed. This stream is like a bedtime story full of scary plant anti-nutrients. The plant boogeyman is going to get you, kitty. To make your bed, Helmet. Jenny's telling you off. It's very interesting to talk about high meat. What do you know about it? Fermented meats. That's all it is. Fermented organ meats or fermented meats. I've actually tried them and I've actually consumed them. They're good for proteolytic enzymes and for certain probiotics, but I wouldn't consume them every day. They're an occasional thing. That's what our ancestors used them occasionally, but then again, if I say to people, if you don't want to use that, you can always use dairy products. I mean, let's not forget, fermented high dairy is what cheese is. That's high dairy. That's a fermented sort of animal product that also people can utilize for MK4, vitamin, the vitamin K2, and for a number of other probiotics and stuff like that. So, you don't necessarily have to consume high meat if it's that's not your thing, So, yes, I've consumed it, but I'm not ideological about it saying you must or you're not carnivore or nonsense like that. Kitty's still got the plant boogeyman outside her door. God, I feel for you. What's the relationship between certain ferritin levels and iron, and what's the optimum level? I'll do a video about that, and it's a bit more nuanced. The reality is, if you're eating an animal-based product that includes copper in there and it's balanced, you're not going to have any problems. A lot of these problems are not happening because people they're not consuming the right things. It's a live stream, mate. What do I call it? The Euro one. That's all it is. My regular sort of thing. It just went down the wrong way. How are you, mate? And the plant boogeyman likes to hide behind my fridge door. Okay. One of those boogeymen. Yes. Good to hear. As long, and try keeping your videos up. Nobody can ever see them. You take them down too fast for most of the rest of the, a lot of us work in the daytime, so we don't get a chance until the evenings. By then, you've already removed it, mate. So, you're too paranoid. Bloody hell. G'day, Bo. Good evening. Good evening to you as well. So you caught up with Bart's videos last night? Yeah, there's plenty of stuff around. That's the thing, for all of us, so. Yes. I think most people, the key thing is, I've always said that you need to keep your diet as clean as possible, and incorporate, what I've been sort of promoting, which is a sort of a diet which is basically a Mediterranean carnivore diet minus the plants, basically, and that includes nose to tail, seafood, dairy, and all these sort of foods, and you won't get into trouble. I mean, as I've shown, like gelatin, which is the connective tissue, has got more copper than basically, the sort of, when you're looking at iron, when you're looking at copper and zinc and all these sort of things, when you eat diverse things, you're not going to get into trouble. If you eat, I've never seen a population which is a steak-only diet. And the level, the problem is with even iron levels, like the ferritin levels and transferritin and all these sort of things, they can vary quite a bit, and it's really hard to know where the accurate levels are. That's why I want to make a video to actually demystify some of that sort of stuff, to explain. And there are variations also with genetics. So, it's not as simple as a lot of people think. Oh, yeah, I've seen that. What's your stored and what's free iron and what's unbound and ceruloplasmin, and, these things all vary from, there are, you have to look at a whole lot of markers in order to work out what's really happening. Looking at one reductionist side marker tells you nothing, So, but at the same time, if you're eating and you're getting all these nutrients, your body will know how to regulate properly. It's been doing it for millions of years. The problem is that we don't eat in the right way, and then we wonder, why am I feeling, well, if you're eating too much, you're incorporating too much zinc in your diet, excessive amounts, and you're not getting enough copper in there, you're going to create imbalances. And it's the same thing with a lot of things in there. It's like vitamin A, retinol competing with vitamin D. You sort of, you also need the other component in there as well, MK4, very important. Then, are you getting the right MK, vitamin K2? A lot of people can't even convert the MK7. It just doesn't happen, So true, mate. Yep, deficiency associated with kidney failure. That's exactly right. And I constantly have people arguing with me about organ meats. And I've actually shown kukuretsi, which is a traditional Greek way of putting all the organs into a skewer and then wrapping the intestines along and then around and actually cooking that over coal. It's beautiful, tasty. Put lemon juice on that. Fucking fantastic. I grew up on that sort of stuff. I'm talking about when I'm 54 now. I was eating this stuff from a youngster from 5, 6 years of age. I don't need somebody to tell me nose to tail. I know it. I experienced it. I lived it. I ate it. And people were eating plenty of organ meats, and they weren't getting sick. So this sort of myth about organ meats are going to be so bad for you if you eat too many. Fuck's sake, there were so many offal shops in Greece around the place in the 80s. Every single square had one or two offal shops. We didn't have steakhouses. We had shitloads of offal shops, So it never made sense to me when people said, "Oh, you're gonna overload on vitamin A or this or that or whatever." I'm going, the body knows how to regulate things that come from real food, from real animal foods. It's only when we basically take vitamins and supplements and shit like that that we get into trouble. So I've never subscribed to that sort of misinformation. Somebody mentioned an interesting point, is that in the past, men were fighting a lot and lost a lot of blood, but didn't fight much these days. Well, they weren't at warfare continuously. There were periods where they could have gone without warfare for a number of years. So I don't think, obviously, bloodletting like women do with their periods seems to be beneficial, but I think it's a false association. It's because what happens is, because people are not eating organ meats like they used to years ago, and now the association is that basically we've got all this free iron, and women are basically bloodletting, or people that go on to give blood reduce their iron load, their free iron load. But hold on, if you were to basically have enough copper organ meats in your diet, or eat certain crustaceans that have also got higher copper content, then you would bind that free iron much more effectively, and you wouldn't have the problem. So I think it's basically we jettison a lot of those foods, because we didn't find them fashionable. Even in Australia, up until the mid 60s, people were still eating organ meats. Even people that had immigrated here, but even the people that had been a number of generations in Australia. But then in the late early 70s, we started getting these newfangled type foods, or the modern foods, or what they called, it's the time Star Trek came onto the TV scene and all these sort of things, and new packaged foods started emerging, and people were sort of encouraged to go down these sort of packaged foods and stuff like that, and people moved away from a lot of good nutrition as a consequence. I think that has more to do with it than anything else. Exactly. And antiviral. I can't remember now. It was one of the recent ones that I actually discussed about copper. On copper surfaces. There was actually a study recently, I think I actually showed on one of them, where copper was the one that actually, viral, droplets don't survive. People used to actually put around the world in copper urns, they used to put water to kill off any pathogens and stuff like that before consuming the water. So how the hell did we go from that to copper toxicity in the modern world? It's because basically, we've stuffed up our whole food supply to such a level where we've got all these imbalances as a consequence of not eating real foods, that these issues do arise. And then again, we've also got the modern day sort of copper type cooking type things that are very problematic, so that's another issue altogether, which I don't want to go into because that would take ages to discuss. But that's another issue in itself. In the past we used to have cast iron. Cast iron. You're cooking in iron, getting additional iron from the cooking ware. People didn't have issues, did they? But they were having nose to tail. They were having organ meats and stuff like that. High in copper, they were basically getting the sort of stuff. They didn't have issues. It's basically we've bastardized the food supply, and we've jettisoned all these nutrient-dense foods for convenience, and that's where most of the problems are coming from, unfortunately. So Kitty actually ate raw calves' livers, bed handed for breakfast, which is good. I mean, I prefer lamb's liver for the taste, but that's me. I do also occasionally have giblets, which is basically chicken organs, mixed and stuff like that, and sort of fry them in lard. I cut them in real fine sort of stuff, throw them in with lard, and actually cook them and sort of do like a stir fry with lard. Beautiful, some pepper, some salt and pepper on top. Beautiful. And then to finish it off, once you've got it on the plate, just put some butter, and it just melts in it. Oh God, it's nothing like it. Oh, you had a birthday since. I saw you. I'll be 54 in December, so I noticed these things. I'll be in September, so I'm still but this year I'll be 54, but in September. So I probably shouldn't say I'm 54. I'm 53 and a half in a sense. So it's just Greeks usually tend to say up until the time. So when it's a Greek thing, so until my birthday, that period, whatever in the year, that's the way we sort of say, I'm I'll be that amount this year. So you say I'm 54. It's just a thing, because we don't celebrate birthdays so much as name days, which is a saint's names. So that's more important. It's usually February for me that I celebrate my name day. So it's a different sort of focus. So I know it's confusing, but it's just the way we are. If people didn't like raw oysters, are there fantastic options that I prefer? Okay, comment. Look, there's a lot of things. I mean, squid is really good. It's got more copper than zinc, which is so if that's you like, I love squid. So there's a lot of different foods you can combine in different ways, and I've always said to people, try to combine different variations, and you will get the benefit. Look, there are different ways of doing liver. Sort of like I have raw. I usually go down to the waterfront in Hobart and get my raw oysters as well. One day I'll have to go down there and ask him, can I actually videotape him and get it, because he's got it all set up, and he's got all these, they bring them in by the boat, and he cuts them open there and then, which is really nice because they're all fresh. So they're not sitting there for hours and stuff like that, which is really nice. And so, look, there are different ways of doing liver. You can basically, skewer it and put it on coal and cook it like that. If you put some pepper on it, there's also rosemary. I don't have a problem with herbs. Put rosemary on it and cook it like that. Beautiful. Gives it a completely different flavor. So you can try that. So really, there are different ways. I mean, I cook my my organ meats. I mean, I have had liver, both fermented, which is an acquired taste, let's put it that way, and I have had liver also raw as well. But when I have it raw, I usually slice it really thin and I salt it, and then I'll have it, and I can eat it like that. But in big chunks, raw, probably not for me either. Yep, exactly. The industrial diet, the modern industrial diet, that's really what's caused a lot of the imbalances that people have in, all these issues with iron and everything else. People didn't have it in the past. It's just, it's an unnatural environment we've created. Yeah, that's really what it is. So if Kitty thinks it's beef liver too strong tasting, calf's liver is mild. That's true. It's younger, so it's a hell of a lot. I mean, some people actually also, because a lot of Southeast Asians consume like they'll consume either lamb's liver or they'll consume giblets, like chicken sort of based organ meats and stuff like that. And they are very mild, the chicken based ones. So as I said, I usually cut them very fine, like on a chopping board, and then basically cook them in lard, and then which really gives them a nice flavor. And then when I salt and pepper, and then I'll actually add butter into the mix, and it just gives it that creaminess of the dairy product, and it's really nice. Give that a try. Let me know what you think. We all like steak. That's a comment, mate. Yes. More giggles. Good to see you. Laugh out loud. The more I look at nutrition, it's quite shocking. It's been changed so much over the past 50 years. Yeah, look, it is shocking. I mean, even in Greece, it's completely different. I mean, I remember back in the 70s, very different. It was very dairy, organ meats, patsa, which is tripe. People that went to work used to go to tripe shops. There was actually tripe shops, all through the Mediterranean in the past. That's what they existed. Tripe shops, organ meat shops, where they used to make on coal, and you would have drinks. This would be lunchtime. You would go to an offal shop and they would literally take it off the skewer and cut it in pieces of this kukuretsi, which I think I've shown in the past in one of my other live streams. And it's just beautiful. You put lemon juice on top, a bit of oregano. There are nicer ways of actually. That's where those herbs and spices. Yes, in small amounts, they've got a very mild hormetic effect, and they're not much of an issue. Obviously, in our environment today, we've got a lot of factors. I would tend to ease up a bit on that hormesis because we get enough hormesis from too many other factors. But at the same time, we need things to be a bit tasty for us, and we need to look back at those traditions and learn. I mean, that's what I've always said to people. Look at your traditions, and you won't go wrong. If you start consuming the foods that your grandparents and great-grandparents consumed, you will do far better. Well, it was very hard. I'm not going to say it tastes like chicken. I'm trying to think of what there was some sort of cheese. It had a bit of a, like that rotten, cheesy type taste that you get, but without, where it tastes like liver. You can still taste the liver, but it's got that like a cheesy type taste. It's a very strange combination. That's the only way I can describe it. There's not a specific way I can actually describe it, but that's, very much an acquired taste. And I just, out of interest, curiosity, I wanted to try it once, and then I go, maybe it's not for me. I'll stick to the cooked stuff that my traditional ancestors always did. So yeah, I gave that a miss, Luke. Jenny, I know a lady that lost 11 pounds in the last 2 weeks simply from not eating fast food due to lockdown. Maybe this lockdown will change people's eating patterns for the good. Potentially, I don't think so. If you go back through history, if you look basically back, trying to think when there was the big blockade on Cuba, and actually the amount of food getting into Cuba had actually reduced. And also after the fall of the Soviet Union, Cubans, their food supply was actually disrupted again, and a lot of people lost a lot of weight and stuff like that, and all their biomarkers improved. Problem is, once the crisis was over, people went back to their old habits. So they'll get some benefit, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately, the majority of people out there don't have the knowledge, and have also been brainwashed to such a level that, they wouldn't know good food if it hit them in the head, which is unfortunate. But there's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with these people. So there's always opportunities, in that regard. I love chicken livers and hearts. Yeah, they're nice. Giblets are really nice. But I seem to be allergic to all grain-fed animals in the US. Yeah, that's the problem with the US. It's you guys are, it's really hard. I mean, we have a lot of the grains here that when they're used for what we call, it's silage. It's all the stalks and stuff like that, the leftovers. There's a couple of, there's alfalfa. There's a whole lot of other things that they actually produce. Certain types of plants for, as feedlot hay, which is sort of low quality grass, things like that in times of, when there's drought and stuff like that in Australia. But that's not so much in Tasmania, more in northern New South Wales and Queensland, if you geographically know. That's a sort of the northeast of the country and parts of Western Australia to the west. But, it's not as bad as the US. The US has got grain subsidies. So corn and all those sort of things are cheap because they're all subsidized. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the businesses out there, they use that model. Where here, even when you're using silage and all that, you don't have the animals locked up. They're out in the paddocks, and all you do is you go out with a ute and you dump it out from the ute, the hay and the silage onto the ground. So they get some grass and some silage. They're not completely eating silage and stuff like that. So it's less of a problem, but it's a hassle. I don't know. Can you get imported stuff from other parts of the world? That's all I can think of. Or if I don't know what sort of space you've got around your home, whether you can actually have your own chickens, like a chicken coop, and basically, when you get too many roosters, take them out of the picture. They're not required. You only need one. So that's another option. I can't really think of any other solution. It's hard. I get free range from Burnie, which is the north of where I live, the state, and even all the IGA store that I go to, they're all basically pastured, free range type, grass fed type. So I'm sort of in like paradise down in Tassie because of the food supply is much cleaner than even many other parts of Australia, let alone the world. So I'm very lucky in that regard. But yeah, sort of solutions, I wouldn't know. There are probably some companies out there that have products. You'd have to search, you'd have to try and see, Google and see what you come up with. It's always a hard thing to find in that regard. What are my thoughts on the lockdown and everything? Do you think it'll eventually affect food supply? Potentially. Yeah, it could potentially. Probably not in Australia, but in other countries, yes. Australia produces 3 times what it actually consumes. So I don't think we're going to have, and with a lot of issues with getting stuff exported, I think that Australia's probably got less issues. So when it comes to animal foods, anything which is real food in Australia is not going to be an issue. Where supplies will drop in Australia will be all the processed stuff, packaged stuff, because a lot of it's produced in businesses in different parts of Asia. So, but that's a good thing, actually. It means that people will be forced to eat meat and eat real foods. So it's probably going to be a good thing for the Australians for a certain amount of time. But for other populations around the world, it could be a big problem who are dependent on big producers like Australia, the US, Canada, and many other parts of the world. For them, yeah, it could be an issue. How much? Hard to say. It depends on how long this issue happens, and the video that I'm going to put on after actually shows how this virus, basically, even in some people, it seems to basically potentially, they can get it a second time. So it may be an issue there that you don't get very good immunity. So that's another factor that could keep the lockdown going for longer. I think that governments are exploiting this reality, and that's the concern. They've trampled over the Australian Constitution, because the Australian Constitution actually prohibits the Commonwealth or any state preventing the free movement of people and goods between the different states. That's in the Constitution. So what they're doing currently is unconstitutional in that regard. And that's why from the beginning I said that if we had basically closed down the borders immediately and quarantined everybody coming in from the day dot, we wouldn't have to close down our economy. The other thing is, if we quarantined all those high-risk groups from the day dot, we wouldn't be in the mess that we are. To a large extent, I mean, even our Prime Minister was more concerned about going to a rugby match than focused on basically, preventing all these cruise ships and airlines coming in, because his business mates were basically concerned, and his tourist mates were basically concerned they were going to lose some revenue. At the end of the day, if the Australians can't go out and go to Bali or other places like that, you're going to get in internal domestic tourism. So the sector wouldn't have been hit as much in that regard. So if they had locked down our borders, not our population, and secured some of these, a better approach with retirement homes and places like that, we probably wouldn't have had to go this far. We've been forced to go this far because of, they've just failed miserably. And it's probably there are probably the only extenuating circumstance I can think of that we haven't had such an issue since the Spanish influenza or the 1957 pandemic. That's about it. And that's probably one reason why, and back in the 1957, it was bad, but it didn't have as an effect like the Spanish influenza, because at that stage, because of the baby boomers and all that, there were more younger people than older people. And so we didn't have that pronounced death rate in a sense, but it was quite a severe, respiratory infections that emerged then. But I think people were more robust because they used to eat animal organ meats and they had better diets compared to the processed shit people eat today. That's another factor that is at play. But it's not. There's no easy answer for these things, Luke. I wish I could come up with answers, and it's easy to basically, sort of, oh, you bad people up there or whatever. But the reality is that, if you're in the same position, how would you react? It's a bloody difficult, and very easy for anyone to make a mess of it. But at the end of the day, on top of that, I am concerned about, freedoms and, and the potential for them to use this to basically erode a lot of our rights and develop systems of monitoring that we've never had in the past. And that's what really concerns me, so yeah, it's not looking good for the future. Let me put it that way. Roast beef is traditional where I was born. Good for you, mate. Yeah. Look, where I grew up with, lamb was probably more a bigger thing in my family. Greeks, lamb, goats. That's basically, even even basically Easter, we basically nearly cook half the lambs of the country. We just go ape shit on just stuffing ourselves for a whole week with lamb. Yeah, so it's but I mean, there's probably two places in northern Greece, and one of the islands to the northeast of which tends to have a stronger sort of beef culture. Tasmania again, the northwest of Tasmania, we have a lot of beef, but in most other parts of Tasmania, it's primarily lamb, and to the south, you'll get some pigs. That's where I get, it's usually Cygnet. It's all in the southern part of Tasmania where I get the majority of my free range pork. But in terms of, it depends on the regions, the cost and stuff like that. Traditionally, nowadays, I mean, everything's available. But the things that my sort of tradition were where I was born in Tasmania, but where my parents come from, it would have been pork and pork, lamb for my mother, pork and goat for my father. Because in the mountainous regions, it's all primarily more goat than lamb. It's just because it's easier to herd them in that environment. Irish traditions is to make soda bread. Soda bread? Yeah, you guys consume a lot of. Remember, you guys have got some of the lowest beta carotene conversion rates in the world. I think I'd say cod liver would be a hell of a lot more important for your diet. But then I mean, potatoes came in, a whole lot of other things into Ireland, which sort of ruined those real older traditions of the land. So is this hold on, do you mean if you're talking about, you're not talking about grain breads, you're talking about breads in terms of within the organ? I hope you are. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Still tastes amazing even through it would. So it is wheat. It is wheat breads, not okay. Wheat bill and heart attack. If you only do it occasionally, we will not revoke your carnivore card. And what's Kitty saying? I was talking to an 87-pound elderly lady. I really only tried to get her to eat hard to help her sarcopenia. She went full on raw carnivore on me and is eating raw brains, liver, heart, and butter. And I suspect she's doing really well, because I know that when I got Dad doing some weights, lifting weights twice a day, he's 85 now this year. It was in January. And since he's been doing that and combining a lot of eating a lot of animal foods as well, he's upped his meat consumption to about 4 times what he used to consume. And he's really strong. He had a bit of sarcopenia as well about a decade ago, and that's all reversed. He's really strong for his age. So hopefully he'll be able to survive this potential virus risk. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Tasmania's even better. Tasmania's the best within Australia. There's a place up in King Island. It's called Cape Grim. And there's in Cape Grim, there's actually, this sort of meat up there is really yellow. The actual fat, because the grass is this really tiny grass which is very high in omega-3s. So you get this really, yellowy type, the sort of color you would get, probably not as yellow as butter, but compared to regular sort of fat, beef fat, tallow. Oh, this is beautiful stuff. I get it That's one of the meats that I usually buy. Yes, she did. So you're in some part of Asia, I suspect, Grimbler? Possibly, or you may be in because even Australia has rice production as well. So I'm not sure where you are. Just let me know. Actually, the good thing is now the drought, where like the amount of rainfall that's coming through is quite substantial. And again, the oceans were getting colder and cooler, and we were getting drought. Now there's actually more precipitation. They're getting warmer again because of these sort of El Nino, these sort of changes. And basically, we're getting a bit of more rainfall. There's more debunking of those charlatans out there with their CO2 garbage. It's very sad seeing them take freedom away, people not getting any sun. Sun's really important. Sun is so bloody important. Blue light in the daytime, obviously it's not good at night. That's why obviously I'm wearing these. But in the daytime, it's very important. It basically sets your circadian rhythms. Very important to get that that sort of light in. And if you're indoors, I've been saying to people, get outdoors. Yes, you can isolate, but you can still get outdoors. You don't have to basically, go for a walk. There's a few places around where I am. I can just go walking around the neighborhood, and most people just use cars, because they can't be bothered walking, because there's a few hilly areas where I walk. So you don't see anyone, which is great. So nobody else wants to hit the hills. Fine, I'm easy. Yes, it's unfortunate. I think that if I'll be supporting definitely any class action in the future, if they don't, once we get over this sort of virus issue, if they don't basically reverse and try to keep some of this sort of shit, there is quite clear, for class action in the High Court against these people, just because, they're using this as an excuse. Yes, the virus is real, but they at the same time, I don't trust these politicians as far as I can throw them. They are really suggesting we should go for herd immunity because virus will mutate, possibly go unnoticed and become killer. Look, listen to the vid that I've got that will come after this that I'll upload, and you'll realize that could be a big risk as well. So there's no easy answers with this. Governments should have acted much earlier, and they didn't, and they really fucked up things. That's the problem. Luckily the populations have responded in general, the majority of them. Well, they're well-trained sheep. That's basically it. So, but the benefit out of well-trained sheep is that basically we've had less outbreaks. And countries which haven't actually acted early, they had bigger outbreaks and more deaths. But I think also, as I pointed out in my past videos, vitamin D plays a big role. And, Europe was, and the north was coming out into spring where your vitamin D levels are the lowest. So those T receptors, they don't have enough vitamin D. And your macrophages are over secreting cytokines and creating a lot of toxicity and damage in the body. Again, because there's not enough vitamin D to regulate them, and basically, these are, and then again, people are not suppressing the virus with enough zinc in their diet. Again, why? Because there's aversion to meat. Not enough. The zinc deficiency, iron deficiency, and all these sort of things are fucking endemic in the Western world, in the majority of countries. because basically, we're so plant-based. That's the problem. You need zinc for your immune system. You need vitamin D for your immune system. You need the fat-soluble vitamins to regulate this collagen-degrading enzymes so they work properly. So even when you get damage from viral loads, you can actually repair that tissue damage, with these collagen regulating type, vitamins that have a hormetic, hormone-like effect or whatever. Won't go into details now, but I've discussed this before, as you guys know, you regulars. How do you go about it? There are not easy answers. At the end of the day, you got to protect yourself, and you got to, utilize some common sense and stuff like that. So do listen to my vid that comes after. Really important. The other thing is B3 vitamins support the NAD plus pathway for more energy, because that will help, support your redox potential, your ability to deal with these things. The virus is the distraction. The main event is the inevitable long overdue collapse of capitalism. Well, we were going to get another big crisis. I mean, we've actually created so much debt, and we're still creating more debt, to such levels, horrendous levels, private, public, the whole lot. It's getting to the stage where we're due for another Great Depression, basically. The funny thing is that this virus has allowed them to basically politically cause it without getting accused for it. So that doesn't mean the virus is real, but remember, there are forces out there that will exploit, could have taken different actions in the early days and will basically exploit to create issues. And that's where the problem lies, so you need to keep that in mind. From my research, there are 24 dead. The last 3 months, yet around 440 people die all day from all causes. Yep, that's true. The difference is that if you don't have a shutdown, and this is quite, compared to it's 2.5 times more virulent than the common cold, which is 1.28. This is 3.28. Now, it's not as high as SARS, which was 9.6. But that was a good thing, because SARS killed people so rapidly that it couldn't spread as fast. This is in that sweet spot. Like, for instance, 2.5 was Spanish influenza. This is slightly higher than Spanish influenza in terms of, how virulent it is. We're not talking about the percentages now. Until we get all the proper statistics through, we won't know exactly. It'll only be after the fact we'll know exactly what the percentage of mortality is precisely. Now people speculating all over the place. I just ignore that. But in terms of how virulent it is basically 2.5 times more virulent than basically the common flu, and where the Spanish influenza was 2.5 approximately. This is about 3.28. So it is more problematic. And so if it gets out of control really rapidly through the population, it will kill more, potentially, because back in those days, people didn't really understand a lot of things. There were no antibiotics. They didn't understand a lot of things, So when these viruses took off in the population, they had no idea how to prevent it, what to do. And so it literally took off in the population and killed 50 million people. In today's equivalent, if you had a Spanish influenza out of control, it would kill about 250 million people. And this has the potential, if you leave it out of control, to kill about 300 million people worldwide. So quite substantially higher numbers than we've seen even from the common cold and stuff like that. But where the common cold, flu, every year it's 250,000 to 600,000, anywhere between that figure. But this, if it's left out of control, it will kill a hell of a lot more. The problem is that, it could have been managed much better without destroying large parts of the economy either. So, and people's livelihoods and people's whole lives. That's a different issue altogether. Violations of the Constitution and stuff like that. These are complete different issues, but, that they needed to basically, isolate what they, as I said earlier, they had isolated the borders, not allowing anybody in. If you're an Australian, bad fucking luck. If you're out, if you're, you're not back home, you come back home, we'll isolate you for a month, like we did with the Chinese up at Christmas Island. We'll stick you into an isolation for a month, and if you're fine, then you can get back into the general population, if you're clean. That's what, and we wouldn't have even had the big costs that we have now. We wouldn't have had the big costs of testing people or anything like that. So it was a failure, basically a failure, where business interest trumped health in the early parts. And that's why we're in the mess now. And now they're exploiting that mess for their own purposes, not only for the health issues, because obviously no politician wants to end up having to bury a lot of people, because that doesn't look good for the next elections. But they also see it as an opportunity for, to gain more power for themselves, because they are power hungry. You mentioned monitoring. You've seen the new 5G antennas go everywhere during the No, I haven't seen any, mate. I don't think, look, 5G is part of the future that they want to create, the Internet of Everything, as they call it, where they can connect everything up, they can connect devices and all sorts. There are crazies out there like Bill Gates and people like that would like to stick a chip in everybody and monitor them and actually, and all that sort of shit, supposedly to protect us from any health concerns and stuff like that. But those part of the elites, they're still the minority at this point in time, which is lucky for the rest of us. But there are those dangerous forces we have to be aware of, and be concerned about. And the slow, slippery slide into fascism, and authoritarianism is there. The risk is there. I agree with you. The risk is there. And 5G antennas and 5G technology makes it easier to monitor things and to communicate with different devices and stuff like that and integrate. It also means faster internet, but at the same time, like anything, it's dual purpose. Everything is, like you can have a car that can basically be a mode of transport, or can be a device by terrorists as a killing device. So everything's got dual purpose. Unfortunately, there are going to be nefarious groups that will basically try and use it for other purposes, not only for communications, in that regard. But that's the sort of world we live in. 5G is not a big problem in terms of health, as long as you're not on a shit diet and not on a poor diet which is not supporting your redox potential. So that's where the biggest issue lies. The problem is the majority of people live, they're literally exposing themselves to too much blue light constantly. If it's not 5G, it's basically their TV, their monitor, computer monitor, everything in their environment, their mobile phone. It's just endemic, and then they've got a shit diet on top of that with too much deuterium in it, which damages their nanomotors. Then they're basically, not getting enough of the B vitamins, in particular, B3 to support NAD+, which declines with age, and if you can't, basically your redox potential drops as you're getting older, the ability, to get oxygen into your body, the ability for oxidative phosphorylation declines. All these things start mounting up your health problems. So, that's, when we did that thing with Bart, as I quite clearly explained, there's no radiation issues, there's no issues with heat shock proteins or any of the other stuff. It's just basically, the blue light component and the issues and some of the frequencies, the issues basically on NAD+. That cycling of NAD plus / in brackets phosphate and NADH, the hydrogen, too much hydrogen building up, you're not getting enough of those electrons basically recycling NAD plus. And as a consequence, you got problems. You're losing energy. You're losing capacity to heal, to improve your health and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of these problems are coming from. And so 5G just compounds that problem, like all EMF. It sort of compounds a bad diet and a whole lot of other things, that we've added to it. So, we're not doing ourselves a favor. The only thing I can say to people, it's going to happen, mitigate it. Start eating appropriately. Start eating these foods that will add and improve your redox potential. Fast more, because fasting and exercise increases NAD plus. So do these things. If you want to have better health, because you're not going to change. We're a minority. We're not going to change the entire world. We can influence it, and over time, maybe people will basically move and all that. I mean, you know me. I'm hardwired with Ethernet. And I'm basically fiber to the premise. It's all optical. That's how I operate. But the thing is, most people, when I turn my mobile phone off, it's turned off at the moment. It's in the airplane mode because I don't want those emissions around me. And if people can't communicate to me in the evening, tough luck. I don't give a shit. Call me tomorrow, when I'm not concerned so much about blue light, or, those sort of emissions. So, we gotta, all we can do is mitigate to some extent and try and encourage other people to use some better strategies in life, because we can jump up and down, but it's not gonna. It'll take a very long time before people realize a lot of these things. Things have to get worse before they get better. Unfortunately, it's a human condition. We learn from suffering. Yep, look, a lot of us are, mate. A lot of us are. G'day, Daniel. G'day, Rick. Key. There is no corona hoax. It is real. The virus is real, but it's being utilized by politicians for misadventure. That's where the problem lies. And 5G, I've already done something with Bart, and Luke was on there, and it's only in terms of redox potential, which is what I've been discussing. And that can be to some extent mitigated. So it's not that horrendous. But for the majority of people out there, it is bad, because basically they're on a shit diet. So they're going to get the real bad effects, So they're going to get their headaches and all sorts of issues, and they won't know what's happening to them, and issues, and basically more toxicity they won't be able to deal with because of their low redox potential. Their nanomotors don't perform well because they're eating so much high deuterium shit, which is destroying their nanomotors and the ability to produce ATP synthase energy. So, they're fucked, in that regard. And people are going to get a hell of a lot sicker. There is a virus. We've actually, check my video right after this and you'll actually see what I mean. Basically, people are not turning up to them. I know people that basically, like a mate of mine who has a store, and he goes he lives in Thailand, for instance, and all that, and he's avoiding the hospital as well, even though he's got a number of issues that he needs to sort out. So a lot of people that have got minor things are putting them off because nobody wants to be anywhere near a hospital, And I even know people that basically work in there that are trying to get leave to get away, but it's being rejected. So, but there are people that are scared, and that's the reason why they are. The only people that are, because there's a mate of mine and his wife is a nurse that works at the Royal Hobart Hospital in Tasmania, and there were people there, but they were in isolation, the ones that were down here. And so the isolation wards, those sort of things are quite heavy with people. But in different parts of the country, but the emergencies aren't, because nobody's out in the streets. So if you take a look, when is the emergency room most packed? I mean, I remember from my own experience going to the emergency room, if you went through the week, there wasn't a lot of people. If you went like on a Friday night or a Saturday night or like that, because everybody's out and about punching each other or doing certain stupid things or whatever, getting themselves injured or whatever, or out in cars running around and crashing into each other, that's not happening. So they're not ending up in emergencies. That's why emergency rooms have very little people in there. But what's happening is, in the intensive care unit parts of the units is where most of the people are that have got the issues. So that's where they are, and that's where they're running out of those sort of ventilators and all these other equipment, because that's not normal. Because in the past, you'd go into emergency, but you'd only have a very small amount of people in emergency that were critical. They had to go to critical care. Now, critical care is being overwhelmed, but they don't have the tools. That's why they've got all these issues. So it's a different ball game altogether. And I know people in the medical that work in hospitals. My cousin from my mother's side is actually a senior specialist in Wollongong Hospital in New South Wales. So I know people, and so I've got inside connections, so to speak. These are real things. So, but unfortunately, there are people there going into emergency where there's hardly anybody turning up because everybody's at home locked away and going, oh yeah, there's no issue. That's just BS. So there's a lot of that happening, unfortunately. Don't fall for it, mate. No, if you're from Northern Europe, I wouldn't recommend it because, salicylate issues. What's wrong with normal milk? Your ancestors would have been drinking nice raw milk and wouldn't have had an issue whatsoever. If you've got leaky gut and stuff like that, fix that first of all, and then everything will flow from that. Then you're fine. If you're adapted to coconut and salicylates, yeah, fine. Coconut milk's less of a problem. It's fat based. As long as they're not using the coconut water in the milk, and that's where a lot of them are, and that tends to has high deuterium levels. Like coconut water is just forget it, has high deuterium levels because a lot of the manufacturers out there are dodgy as dog shit, and so they will dilute with a lot of coconut water their coconut milk, and as a consequence, you'll end up with far more deuterium. Where fat normally has very low deuterium, but when you add the water, that's where the plant concentrates the actual deuterium. So that means that heavier type of isotope of hydrogen, so which damages. It's all these neutrons that actually end up trying to push through your ATP synthase and where only protons should go through. And if you're adding too much of that, the other thing is that if you're adding too much deuterium, the downside of that is that if you don't hit your threshold of deuterium, the amount of neutrons will be flushed out in your urine. So your body will, but that also will dehydrate you. So the more deuterium you've got in the system, the more dehydration you'll sustain. More fat, less dehydration. So that's the sort of the hydration issue. I know Cole, the guy with the snake juice diet, is recommending people drink urine. Don't listen to him. He's an idiot. Doesn't know what he's talking about. Urine has anywhere between 150 to 600 parts per million. So just think of it. The sweet spot for deuterium is 120 odd. Anything above 130 isn't a very good idea. And as long as it's balanced by a lot of fat, which is much lower, like lard is the lowest of all the fat of all the animal fats, 116 parts per million, where refined sugar, for instance, is 155. So from 150 to 600, and even that's even worse than seed oils. Seed oils are 255. So these highly processed oils that have got high levels of deuterium because of the processing, you could potentially consuming urine, get even a bigger load, depending on a whole lot of factors, what you've eaten before, how hydrated you were. There's a whole lot of factors, anywhere from 150 to 600, to 300 parts per million. 300, yeah, not 600, 300. 600 is another thing. So that's a big mark. 255, that's 45 parts per million higher at the high end than seed oils. You might as well be guzzling down vegetable oil. Crazy stuff. Don't listen to him. I mean, his snake juice is not too bad, but some of the other stuff that he talks about, oh God Almighty, yeah, all our ancestors sat around fucking dousing down urine. Fuck's sake. God Almighty. Or almond milk, or fucking all this other shit, highly processed, highly deuterium based crap that we're being pushed. Yep, there are definitely, and they will need them because they've really let the cat out of the bag in that place. So, yes, concerning. The initial virus was not transmitted from humans to humans, but Chinese changed. Nah, there's nothing. Look, I don't. No, that's not the case. I mean, CSIRO, the Koreans, all these different populations have looked at it. It's to change a virus is very difficult. Believe me, the reality is that there was always, from the beginning, human to human. The Chinese just played it down. They played it down because they didn't want to. It was the local authorities. The biggest problem with the local authorities is you've got local political officers and political staff and all that. They don't want to be seen bad from their top. They're not managing things properly or keeping things under control. And they just basically lied and tried to keep things all covered up. And then when it got out of control, they could no longer control. They had to tell the central government what was happening. And then the central government came in and put some, really closed things down rapidly. And that's what prevented even bigger outbreaks and a bigger spread of the actual virus. It gave most other countries a bit of more time to prepare, in a sense. But no, that's I don't buy that. Countries don't do that sort of shit. What's the benefit? People do things because there's a benefit. When there's that involved, I can understand it. People go to war for that, for resources and stuff like that. They don't do things just for the fun of it. Crazies, there are crazies out there, yes, but no, not governments or societies do that. They do it for very other reasons in that regard. Do you recommend doing sports? Which ones in particular? High intensity interval training while you're at home, because it's very hard to go for long walks. So I would basically do high intensity throughout the day a number of times. So when I get up in the morning, I will lift weights while fasted. So I'll do until exhaustion. And then basically I will, half an hour later, I'll have a meal. And then basically, and usually I do it about 10:30. So at 11 o'clock, when my cortisol's the lowest, that's when I'll have my first meal for the day. And then midday, when I'm only having it before I have any snack or anything like that. When I'm talking about snacks, I'm talking about a bit of dairy, bit of cheese, stuff like that. I will basically, do some high intensity work at home and stuff like that, and also some weights until exhaustion. And then I'll have my dairy right after that. Some cheese, possibly a bit of raw milk, a few things like that. Sometimes a second glass of raw milk if I really feel like it. And, so, yeah, that's the only thing, there's not much you can do. I wouldn't walk, through the house like a mad, that... well, God, you'd have to do it for hours upon hours. You're not going to get any benefit. Really, high intensity is really the way to do it. That's what I would do. Whether you're racing on the spot or whether you're basically, doing jumping jacks or whatever, stuff like that. You really need just to do high tempo until exhaustion and then just relax. And that's actually healthier for you, because it strengthens the heart, it strengthens all those different body parts. It's the way we would, people, exercise is a modern thing. People did not do exercise. They did work. They worked all the body parts, all the muscle groups and all that. And when you do these high intensity stuff, you sort of lift weights until exhaustion and stuff like that. You turn a tire over multiple times and stuff like that. What it does is you're working all different body parts, lifting things and putting them down in a safe way. Things like that. You're working a whole lot of different body parts, and that's the whole purpose for health. That's what traditional people would have eaten properly and done. All muscle groups would have been engaged to do physical activities. That's healthier. Gyms are not a health place. And show me one centenarian who is a marathon runner. None of them exist. They're all basically catabolic and all basically, don't last very long. Most of them having large hearts and heart attacks and all sorts of issues. So, our ancestors basically were mid-done persistent hunters. They walked, they didn't overexert themselves, and then coming in for the kill, they used all their body parts and moved very rapidly and sprinted, which is high intensity, and then engaged the spear and killed. That's how we're meant to basically operate. That is our ancestral approach, not this sort of modern sort of reductionist crap, or in gyms where you isolate different things and you disproportionately out of whack develop things that apparently look attractive to certain people, but not to me, and I don't think it's a healthy thing either. But people want to do that. It's their body. Who am I to tell them what to do? It's their business. I actually had footage of people going to the hospitals on a channel. They were also empty. Yep, that's true. Like what I said earlier, people are at home, hidden away, avoiding accidents. And basically, you're not going to get a lot of people in emergency or turning up for general, elective surgery, because it's all been closed down. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's going in for a, cataract operation or anything like that. Everybody's avoiding everyone else. They're isolating themselves. So the only people that are in the hospitals currently are people that have basically got the virus, and they are in isolation wards, which nobody can get access to. So we're not going to see any videos because they're in those isolation wards, basically, So, and remember, I've got people that work in that are related to me that work in the medical field. So I know, so it's not, there's no conspiracy here. Countries don't create viruses just to create conspiracies. That's just, that's nonsense. Viruses have been with us since our existence as a species, viruses, bacteria and all that. And occasionally they get really nasty and they take out a lot of people, and sometimes they don't. Okay, for some reason my my mic just disconnected. Yeah, I can't even remember what I was saying. Anyway, yep. So I think about the hospitals and stuff like that. So it's basically how the politicians have responded and how they're exploiting the thing that pisses me off more than anything else. Uh, look, I don't think the virus has nothing to do with the Communist Party of China, or their mismanagement in the early days. Yeah, they're responsible. They should get a stern dressing down in that regard. But that was the local authorities that were trying to cover up so their political masters in Beijing wouldn't find out. So that was more that. We'll just cycle through. What are the most common deficiencies in humans? Depends what you eat. It really depends on what you eat. If you're looking at the general community, they're deficient in a lot of things: copper, zinc, selenium, DHA, arachidonic acid. Because they're not eating enough animal foods. Because arachidonic acid, which is the omega-6 of the animal world, that actually has repair. It's not only basically to support the immune response, it's not bad. It basically is there for the immune response, but at the same time, arachidonic acid also has repair mechanisms, roles. The plant stuff, LA and ALA, are the stuff that basically is not required by the human body. And different people have different levels of conversion. It's like beta carotene. Who needs beta carotene? You need retinol, yes, but you don't need beta carotene. And people have varied levels of conversion. The problem is 70% of our diet now, or well, not us, but the majority of the society is plant-based. All these people are deficient, and they're all unhealthy. And you just have to take a look at, well, not now, but we're in the good old days before the virus, looking out in the streets, and you saw plenty of them, dragging all that extra weight around, and and with all their other health issues. It depends. A lot of deficiencies. The only thing you'll find deficiencies in carnivores you may get or imbalances in when they're only eating steak-only diets. That can happen. Not everyone. I'm not saying this is not a general thing, but in a large proportion, yes. Because especially if you're coming from the British Isles, when you look at steak, it has carotenoids, not only retinol, but also other carotenoids in the fats. Now you're getting enough, especially if you're eating lean cuts of meat. Possibly not. And that could be an issue. And then what you put on it is another issue. So you can basically have some level of retinol, retinoic acid sort of deficiency. Very unlikely, but you could, depending, as I said, the sort of lean cuts, type of foods that somebody may have. There's a lot of things. Then there are people that basically are not very good converters. There's a lot of conversion pathways in terms for collagen synthesis, for all these different things that some people are not as good. I mean, what was the other one that I was looking at today? The tyrosine one, I can't remember it. Anyway, it was part of something that I was looking at, a forward thing to discuss about aminos that certain types of aminos that don't convert well within the human body. And so, when you're only eating one type of animal food and not getting a variety, you may not be getting sufficient because you may have some level of conversion impairment of the essential amino acids. So you get an essential amino acid pull from the food, but there are some things that can't as well convert into the non-essential ones. I mean, one of the classic ones which declines with age, which is taurine, which I've discussed. If you're especially over 50, you should be on a taurine supplement, because it's amino transporter. And it's the reason why a lot of older people probably it drives sarcopenia as well, because you're not getting enough, most people don't need enough animal products. But there are a lot of sort of type of deficiencies that can actually occur, imbalances, zinc to copper, all sorts of things. And it depends on the person as well, what type of foods they are combining, other things, potential environmental things that can basically eat into. So if you're constantly being affected by let's say you're eating a lot of liver, getting a lot of copper and stuff like that, but you're not eating a lot of muscle meat, and then you've basically got a lot of viral loads and a lot of pathogens, let's say things like mold in your home and all sorts of things attacking your body, and you're using more zinc than you would normally, then you can basically get a copper predominance and a zinc imbalance. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things, and that's why I say, the richer your diet is and more diverse, the more protective it is. Because that's how our ancestors, they didn't stick to one type of animal food. They ate everything because they were trying to get as many calories as possible. And so that's a much healthier approach. And that's how our bodies are designed, in terms of, over millions of years. So, show me a steak-only society, multi-generational steak-only society, and I'll switch to steak-only. Doesn't exist. I'm expecting some named. That's another comment from Kitty. How is a collagen degrading enzyme? No, I didn't say it kills a virus. I said the virus, once it gets into the system, it actually causes, the sort of cytokine exposure and causes damage to your tissue. You basically need these collagen degrading enzymes play a role in actually both tearing down collagen and rebuilding it and remodeling it. And that is regulated by the fat soluble vitamins, which is basically retinol, vitamin D3, and MK4, which is the K2 of the animal form. Those are the three things that actually, and in the lungs, it's predominantly vitamin D3. So that's what I was talking about. Not that these collagen degrading enzymes have any role with virus killing properties. No, nothing to do with that. And that other thing that you were talking about, I think, was a proteolytic enzyme. Exactly. Yep. Proteolytic enzymes are fairly good on an empty stomach. There are better ones than that. And there are other ones that actually play a bigger role. See, those are more for digestive reasons. There are others, and I'm going to do a video in the long run down the track. I actually take one of them, which is an immune boosting enzyme. Plus, it also has an ability to some of the components of it to clear out, sort of scarred tissue and, damaged tissue and all that, which is really good as well. That will be for a future video clip that I will do. I didn't incorporate in this one that I've done for the corona, the one that I'm going to put up, because I want to do a second one that add a few other things, in that regard. You got to create video clicks, it's the whole purpose, but it keeps on reminding me that I need to create more material for clickbait. It's one of those things. Thanks, mate. Huge issues caused by nutrient deficiency in low stomach acid. Yep. I've always said, you've heard me profusely, like a broken record. All disease does not start in the gut; it starts in the stomach. If your stomach cannot acidify, cannot break things down properly, everything below that starts not working properly. You get malabsorption, you get all these issues. Your liver doesn't work properly, nothing works properly. Your bile sort of, everything goes out of whack because you basically got candida, bacterial overgrowth, H. pylori, all these things that start creating havoc through your entire digestive tract. And that's where the problem lies. Let alone, remember, stomach has a low pH, your colon has a low pH, your small intestine is alkaline. If basically these are out of whack, the whole lot, and it's neither alkaline or one, and the other ones are not acidic enough, and they're more the same, all those valves can't get the proper signaling and close properly. So it literally becomes a highway from mouth to your anus, and that's when a lot of problems happen. And that's why I say fix the stomach. The stomach is the most important thing to fix, and everything flows from there. Once you get that happening, you may need to take proteolytic enzymes for a while. You may need to take enzymes and betaine and basically bile salts, and also massage, as I've said before, massage the actual your under your rib cage on this side, where your bile ducts are close to that rib, and massage into the bile ducts and all that to release and get a lot of that sludge moving to clear out. So, and then also you may need milk thistle to fix, because you remember that FXR receptor, and basically, that those enzymes in there need to basically start fixing, repairing the liver and working properly with the stomach, because they work, it's usually your liver starts backing up and creating issues when your stomach's not working properly. It really is a havoc, of problems. So, it all starts in the stomach and then goes from there in causing all sorts of problems all over the place. Our ancestors didn't have a problem. They had a low pH, 1.5. They scavenged. They ate all sorts of things. They didn't have any problems. When you do a long-term plant-based, you eat too many plants for a very long time. It's the old thing, use it or lose it. Your pH goes down because these are more alkaline. Your stomach is designed for acidic type foods like meat, like these things. These are the things. Then that bile and those enzymes from your pancreas will basically make all that broken down aminos, fatty acids, and all that will make that more alkaline in order to better absorb those things through your chylomicrons and through your system, via the portal vein into your liver. That's how it's supposed to work. But if you're eating a whole lot of shit, a whole lot of plants and all that, not getting enough of these foods, what you do is you make that environment far too alkaline. You basically don't really require as much low pH. And over time, you don't secrete, because you're not getting enough fat, because you're eating a low-fat diet. You don't secrete as much bile. That sort of backs up. You end up with gallstones and gall sludge and all that sort of stuff, and everything doesn't work properly. So when you try to go to a carnivore diet or try to do something a bit more healthy, things really go to shit initially, and people have problems. And I always say, fix the stomach, get things flowing again. It's the only way to fix things. And then most things go away. You don't struggle after that. Would you prescribe yourself to Frank's schools of carnivory or Mortarbart's school of carnivory? I don't subscribe to either one of them. Frank just recently discovered what I would say the Mediterranean carnivore diet, and was more from interacting with me. If you go back and look at videos of Frank, he never talked about, too much other than, fish roe and, a couple of things like that, liver, fish roe and steaks. And most of the time he only cooks steaks and eats steaks at home. So, so basically, no, I wouldn't actually, and on top of that, now he eats a whole lot of fructose in terms of, honey. So, and I actually sent him a link of some of the old bodybuilders, how to actually, so he could compete against these vegans, and, about some information in that regard, and tried to encourage him to use basically the old bodybuilders' diet, which was basically eggs and dairy. So it was a combination of eggs and dairy, which is both anabolic, enough cholesterol and all that, but enough to basically give you that anabolic effect to build up more muscle protein synthesis with far more better precursors for that. I don't know why he's using fructose in that mix when, from the dairy, you're getting enough, glucose for that purpose. So why the fuck would you use basically, fructose is beyond me. So that's his choice. Bart's sort of, he doesn't prescribe to any real school. From my knowledge, what Bart consumes is basically, he doesn't promote anything in particular, because he's basically just doing his own thing. He tells you, you do your own thing. I've got no problems what you do. So he's not actually prescribing anything. He just wants to basically show the charlatans who they are and basically have a go at them and all that, and expose them. But his approach is basically, he has a bit of fish, he has a bit of pork, he has a bit of lamb, he has a bit of beef, and he even has the occasional bit of organ meats here or there. He doesn't prescribe it to anyone. He says, if you want to do steak only, that's your business. If it works for you, fine. But he does a few mixed things in that regard. And I've spoken on many occasions of people that have got certain ancestries. They need more fat-soluble vitamins. They need more, you need to eat liver, you need to eat eggs and stuff like that. And he consumes eggs and liver and stuff like that, smaller amounts than I do. But he's aware that, his ancestry has, these sort of pathways like I do with choline and retinol, which is much lower, that regulated. So you need to get more of that from the diet. So liver and eggs are the best source of choline. Which one you pick is your choice. You'd have to eat shitloads more in terms of muscle meat to get that. You can, but you would have to you'd have to eat quantities like, Sean Baker does. Bart doesn't want to do that. So, but he doesn't want to lecture people how to do their carnivore diet either. I don't either. I don't sit there lecturing, telling you guys how to do. I tell you what I do. If you want to adopt some of those practices, some of you guys here that come are basically into raw stuff, which I'm not heavily. Neither is Bart. I probably eat more raw. Bart eats no raw. So, Frank eats probably more raw than even me, but that's his choice, what he wants to do. But I don't, sit around sort of poking fingers. Frank does, and a few others do, like Severity and people like that. Apparently, we're all slaves because we basically cook our meat. I find that hard since hominins have been cooking their meat for 1.5 million years. And prior to 10,000 years, there were no slaves. They were just tribal hunters and gatherers. So I don't know whether he gets that logic anyway. But, people have their own strange ideas. I'm in neither group because basically I do a Mediterranean carnivore diet, which includes seafoods, snails. Yes, Greeks do eat snails as well, snail dishes. So it is quite varied in all sorts. Any animal product you can eat, we eat it, basically. Anything, brains, organs, hooves, whatever, part of the animal, nothing gets thrown away, get cooked or bone brothed or whatever. So it's a very mixed variety of things that we utilize in our foods. A lot of dairy products. Greek diet is very heavily into dairy. And I've done things with Bart in the past and shown how the Greeks consume as much milk as the Swiss. So, I was drinking dairy from a young age. And it was only after me trying to encourage, because I actually promoted on Frank's, before I even set up my channel, I kept on putting comments on the virtues of milk and all that. And, and slowly but surely turned Frank around to consuming milk. The only reason why Frank and me don't talk anymore and we don't communicate anymore is because basically I sent him an email and I really had a go at him about having a go at Bart. And I said, well, me and Bart are not part of the North American carnivore, sort of club. We're down here in the southern ocean, well away from all that. We're not involved. We, personally, we don't have anything against them. What they do is their business and all that. I'm not at war with anyone, neither with Frank or that. But, now Frank just won't talk to me, won't email with me, won't contact me. If I put comments on his, which I've sort of given up. I've tried a couple of times. He just doesn't respond at all. He just ignores me. Fair enough. Good luck to him. I've got no problems. I still promote his and Garland Farms as well on my channel as people to go and get good quality meat. I've got no problems. He's a carnivore. I want to promote and support people in the community. If he doesn't feel the same, that's his problem. If he gets nasty, I'll just basically ignore him because there's no value in it. I don't think he'll ever get nasty because there's more email content that could be released that could cause him more grief than me. So, but one thing I would never do is actually release any correspondence. He would have to start initiating that selectively, going after me before I did anything like that to him. So I suspect he won't. And so there's not a non-issue because, look, good luck to him. I hope he does well with his channel. I've sent him information about, these old bodybuilders and their techniques and all that. And I hope he uses it to basically improve, some of his own monetization of the stuff that he provides to people and gets a benefit out of it. I don't have ill will to anyone, I can disagree with people, but just because I disagree with people on certain things, I even disagree with Luke, Hellman knows, but, we're good friends, there's we've got different opinions. People can have different political opinions, different ways of viewing the world or stuff like that. We don't need to basically be at each other's throat or be nasty about it in that regard. We're all here for a short time, trying to help each other as much as possible. We all learn. It's a learning experience for all of us, and just treat it like that. This sort of tribalism, you're part of that school or that part of that school. I'm willing to cooperate and work with anyone if they're willing to work on an even cure and in a decent and friendly manner with me. Not a problem, if they want to get nasty, I just go away. Life's too short to basically have too many enemies. That's what I say anyway. Morphology, yep, it is real. They have. It's a nasty bugger, but it's not as nasty as, SARS was much worse, and even MERS was much worse. Like MERS was up to 30. Its virulence was just slightly below Ebola. So MERS was really nasty. It killed people. That's another reason why it didn't spread as fast, because it killed people so fast that it couldn't actually get legs to move beyond the Middle East, luckily, because that was a nasty, nasty virus. Only bested by Ebola. Lost my job, unfortunately. Yeah, look, a lot of people, as I said, politicians mismanaged the whole situation, where if they'd secured the borders and prevented infections coming into the country and basically isolated people coming back into the country, whether from seaports or whatever, they wouldn't have to have done these sort of radical things. They got a lot to answer at the next election. So when you are voting next time, think twice about giving people that caused you the grief. It sucks, the old economy. Yep. A lot of people are going to suffer, and there's going to be, the longer it takes, the more damage, structural damage to the economy it'll do, and it may require 30 years. Who's got 30 years to wait for a big recovery? That's what happened back with the Great Depression, 30s, 40s, up until, nearly 2.5 decades before things got back. Yeah, so I'm worried as well in that regard. So you're not the only one. It's a lot of people worried. Apparently Bill Gates from hell is working on a chip already. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That arsehole is a real nasty piece of work. I actually came across a lady that actually goes back into his history and his early life and some of the connections of his family. Very interesting. I'll send you some information because you're more into that. I sort of don't have the time for that sort of stuff, but I will send you the information and you can go jackrabbit on it, mate. I think you'll enjoy the stuff. Through the NAD plus. But it can be slightly mitigated. Eat cleaner, fast, exercise. No, I don't. Lana, he actually lives in New Zealand, across the Tasman. I live in Tasmania, which is an island to the south of the continent of Australia. So, yeah, we're quite far away in that regard. It's not too far. I mean, in the past when we could fly, it'd only be about 2 hours flight or something like that. But now it's yes, unlikely to see him for a while or get an opportunity to fly to New Zealand. I have been thinking about going for a holiday to New Zealand. It's one country that I haven't been to, so I would like to go there. I've been, through my youth until more recently, I've pretty much traveled throughout Asia and throughout Europe primarily. So, because I've either lived in Europe, and so I've traveled within that region, or I've lived in close to Asia and I've traveled there. But for the life of me, I don't know why I never went to New Zealand. It's just basically, just never happened. Yes, he's a bit of a distance, but he's half Australian, so part of the family in that regard. Yeah, if people can like and subscribe, if they haven't, please do. Yeah, well, it's not as severe, as that ailment. There's no real signs to show that it's that severe. Yes, it does interfere with oxidative phosphorylation through the NAD plus, which it reduces its efficiency, and that's where the issue lies. But you can actually mitigate that by increasing your niacin and reducing your amount of deleterious sugar and stuff like that. So, because if it was to that extreme level, as some people have stated out there, we'd be all falling dead all over the place. So that's not happening. So yeah. But it's as I said, all these little bits add on to the load, which basically affect our health. So. Oops. I've just overshot. Isn't it nice? That's one thing about StreamYard. Local hospitals are putting staff on. Yep. Yeah, look, I know. Even my mate, his wife, she's basically on extra duties as well. Some of the areas they're putting them on as a preventative thing as well. That's true. So they in some parts where they haven't actually had a lot of exposure. But some hospitals are overrun. It depends where you are. So it's not the same picture everywhere. But these are sort of precautionary steps. Whether they're overkill or not, time will tell. Usually after a crisis, when people look back, they realize that some things were overdone or underdone or whatever. Nobody ever gets things properly done. That's another comment. In the early days, no. The local government there did a shit job, tried to cover it up, and were quite abysmal. But the actual central government, they did a pretty good job. That's true. Most commentators that have looked at, even people that are basically dislike China traditionally have basically said, yeah, they did a pretty good job in the end. It could have got worse, but. So Lana asks, Harry, which of these subjects should I be doing or going into? Biochemical science, pharmaceutical science. That's what one of my cousins does. She's a pharmacist to some multinationals and does consultancy as well. Medical science. I always say to people, what do you like? What do you want to do, with your life? Do things that you love. You'll do the best in them. If you don't do things that you love, I think you have to have a passion for things to become the best in things. You only get one life, one single life. You don't get multiple lives to make multiple choices. People tell you that, it's all this sort of the PC culture. Oh, don't worry, little thing. You'll have plenty of time. That's a lot of bullshit. Once commitments come into it, costs, living, paying the bills, and all that, you don't have the time. That's just shit. Find something that you're passionate about and go into it, whatever that is. It's not for me to tell you what to do. You have to look at these things. Even if you spend like half a year or, like through this period where you're probably at home, investigate. You've got so much free time on your hand. Sit down and investigate. Look at the different fields and say, and read up a bit on them, on every single one of them, and see how you feel about it. How really in your heart you go, I really could get into this. Or that's probably not for me. That's, sometimes that gut feeling is what basically will mean that you will either enjoy something or you won't. Don't go against your own grain, so to speak. Hope that helps. Poor Harry will never get to bed at this rate. I'm off to soak my 53-year-old kitties in some rare vitamin D on the balcony. Too bad. My neighbours will keep listening through. Yeah, look, enjoy yourself, Bo. You go and relax yourself, do whatever you need to do. At the moment, it's 10:15 here, so I'll probably run it until for another basically another 45 minutes just to try and get through most of this sort of stuff. Look, no promises that I'll get through everything tonight. So I'm sitting out. So you're in Norway without a shirt, nice. Look, I'll tell you one thing that because my father comes from a mountainous region in Greece, and I've got like hypothermia genes. And when I get moving, even when it's cold in the winter, I could be with shorts and t-shirt, Greek. And people go, what? And I've been out, like a mate of mine who his mother's comes from the British Isles, and I've got less clothing on, and he just shakes his head. And the cold just doesn't get to me. Even when I was doing keto, the cold wasn't getting to me, which was great. Probably only towards the end, and that was when I was just doing too many plants and all that, and that's just stupid. I learnt my lesson since then. But, I tend to basically sweat and heat up very quickly, which is nice. So I can, I don't mind the cold. Always struggling with the heat when I'm in Southeast Asia, even though I do acclimatise very easily, but it's still, first couple of days, it's until I get used to it. Yes, there's nothing like the sun. One of the healthiest things, you've got melanopsin on your skin, that's just taking in that energy as much as you can get. I mean, if you're in the tropics, you can get about a third of your energy requirements from the sun directly. But if you're not, As I say, beggars can't be choosers. And red light in the early hours that and later in the afternoon, that's also really important as well. So it's not only the midday sun, but also the early hours and the later hours as well for your circadian rhythms and everything else. It's really healthy. Getting into that, these sort of things are just very important for us. Is it true that you are of Greek? I'm of Greek ancestry. Yep. Both of my parents come from Greece. My genetics would be strongly from the Peloponnese, so sort of southeast, which is sort of where. Actually, let me just bring that up. Since so pretty much I did a 23andMe. This is the comes up. I don't know what's that slew. So pretty much that's sort of my ancestry. So these predominant from this area. So that's right there is where I've got the cursor is where Sparta was. So that's Corinth. So it's basically all this, that part, that part, that part, that part, Greek Macedonia, and this part up here. All this was part of the Doric tribe. So that was the last tribe, or as they were called, the sons of Hercules. So they dominated this whole region, that part. This was Eolis from Thessaly, and Attica, which is basically Ionians, and along the coast down here. Also the Minoan civilization that was also conquered by the Doric tribes. Obviously, that's an old thing and all that, but I don't identify as a Doric, but my predominant genetics are from those sort of regions where they predominated in that regard. The other parts, because the other parts that are supposedly Italian are not really Italian. That's just BS because they've got no idea. The problem is this is an American site, and so these are broadly Southern European, the 7.2 whatever, but the majority of my genetics come from this part of Southern Italy. This part of Southern Italy, so all this part from Naples all the way down into Sicily was predominant Greek colonies. And it was only when the two churches split, the Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic, and the Greek, which is also a Catholic church, but an Orthodox Catholic church, when they split the two, that's when a lot of the Southerners were actually forced to give up Greek and also to assimilate to Catholicism and Latin. And that's when a lot of the Greek these people ceased. But in reality, all Southern Italians are predominantly Greek in their genetics. And most of the people that left are that went to America from Southern Italy, because they were the poorer parts, and they went to the United States. So when they come up on these lists and all that of 23andMe, because there are more Italians living in America than Greeks, they subscribe these genetics to Italians, but really they are actually Greek genes which predominate in Greece as well, these genes. But, what do you do? This is the way the site is. If there were more Greeks that basically were on the 23andMe, obviously those genes would show up as a more dominant in the Greek world. So then immediately 23andMe would say, oh, there are more Greeks with those genes. They would automatically change them, but they haven't. And that's the reason for it. Not that I don't really give a shit. It doesn't really bother me that much. It's just sort of some sort of correction in that regard. So pretty much I'm 95% more or less if you ignore the, 90-odd% if you ignore those other things. I've got a bit of Cypriot and a bit of Anatolian. The Anatolian part, is it going to come up? Why did that come up like that? I think you have to do it via that. It's not working properly, if I don't know why. See if I can get it through here. Pretty much we've all got genes, I was going to say, from these sort of regions. So there's obviously mine are Greek, none of the other Balkan regions. The Italian ones are basically from southern Italy. I've got no Sardinian, no Iberian type genes. Got something, the broad Europeans, no Jewish, no Eastern European, no British Isles, no Finn, no Germanic, no Scandinavian. Some broadly European genes that everybody has, 0.2. There's an Anatolia. There's no Turkish detected, but these are, remember, in Anatolia, there's not only the Turks, but there's also basically other older, like the Hittites and all these other populations that existed in those regions that they got mixed up with a lot of different people. So those genetics are generally amongst all those. You'll find them amongst the Arabs, you'll find them amongst the Greeks. A number of Europeans will have those because they we came out of Africa, we came through those regions. So it was but those are very historical, going back thousands of years when those early migrations were happening out of Africa. So we've all got those sort of things. Bit of Cypriot. So that's a lot of the Cypriots are from the Achaean tribe, the Achaean Greek tribe, which most of them, they were pretty much in regions where a lot of those, they got pushed out by the other tribes, and as they migrated in, especially the Doric tribes, kicked a lot of them out into the Aegean and other areas, turned them into what potentially may have been part of the Sea Peoples as well. But that's for another day, another story. Nothing from the Caucasus, some broad West Asian, and some Levantine, which is the sort of areas of the Levantine, which is basically Syria, those sort of areas. Understandable, a lot of the Christians migrated out of that into the Greek world, so there would be some minor genetics there from those people. And that's about it. But, pretty much primarily, Southern European Greek, with, if you ignore that part, more or less, with some genetics here or there because of earlier, as we moved out of that Africa. So, Yes, pretty much Greek ancestry on the main. So that's quite clear from that sort of information. So that'll be the first and last time you got. Well, I'll probably show you some of the others. I did show you some of the others that apparently I'm supposed to be balding, supposed to have grey hair because I get photosensitivity and all that. Actually, my hair's actually improved a bit since I've been out of not as much in the sun, because we don't have much sun at the moment, and my hair is starting to get a bit darker again. But that usually happens in winter. But I've got a lot of photosensitivity. And my mother had severe photosensitivity in her 30s. She went white, she went grey. And even my cousins on my mother's side, all of them are bloody grey from their 30s or 40s. So, I sort of missed that. Even though I've got the genetics there, maybe because the way I eat or the way I live, I've down-regulated those genes potentially. I'm hoping, hope I don't go any more grayer or lose any more hair. My hair tends to be, quite thick and strong, so I don't have those sort of issues and doesn't come out. So, maybe it's the diet. I actually find when I'm consuming more, I get more zinc into my diet and stuff like that. Even my the hairdresser that actually cuts my hair, she goes, God, it's thickened up quite a bit. So I think animal foods do help in that, collagen-rich foods, because I do consume collagen-rich foods as well. And I think that, if you've got the fat-soluble vitamins, you've got the collagen-rich foods, not just the muscle meats and all that, I think that plays a role in better hair quality. Biotin, I actually consume a lot of eggs, and biotin is very important as well. I do it for choline because I have a genetic predisposition where I can't synthesize internally endogenously, and also I can't convert choline to folate. So I have another number of MTHFR issues and stuff like that. So I have to eat these sort of foods to support those pathways, because my ancestors did. That's why these things got down regulated in my genetics. Simple as that. Like the Irish and many of the British from the British Isles, also because they consumed a lot of cod liver. Cod. I mean, many people probably forget the cod wars that were between Iceland and the British Isles, but I do. I remember that, because that was part of your diet. So if you're not eating animal-based, fats, and you're not getting enough retinol, you're going to have issues, health issues. That's why, there's so much, far more health problems in the British Isles than there are in other parts of Europe, because other Europeans can convert more beta carotene. But British peoples and Irish peoples can't sufficiently. Different grades, but they have far more issues in those pathways. So I suspect you're British with a name like yours, Bill Edwards. So you should look at incorporating more organ meats and eggs into your diet, and I suspect you'll do much better for it. Buffering. Oh yeah. That's StreamYard. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. It's just one of those things, mate. It drives me up the wall, but it's a headache. But thanks, mate. It's a Greek thing. Look, no, I'm just joking. I sort of got exposed. I was more into sports when I was a youngster, and I even played soccer. I did a lot of cycling and stuff like that, but went to Greece, and I sort of a more working class neighborhood where Dad's younger brother lived. He was a mechanic. Dad was a Boilermaker welder and had a small business as well, had a small shop as well. And I sort of grew up in that sort of, lower middle class or middle class, and, sort of working class background and stuff like that, And so very different lifestyle and all that. But I sort of got involved with a second cousin on my father's side or from his mother's side. And, let's say he was into mischievous sort of things and started getting me into mischievous sort of things. It may be street smart, but at the same time, it could have led me down the wrong path, so to speak. And so Dad literally had to moved us, the whole family, to the other side of the city, to a very upper middle class privileged area where I felt completely like some dumb fuck, that I just had merged out of the cesspool. And these kids were just, ridiculing me. So it sort of gave me the incentive, maybe my Serpanos ego, gave me the incentive to really start reading everything. And I started reading science, economics, philosophy, German philosophy, Hegelian logic, dialectics, that is, the ancients as well. So I started, I remember one week I'd actually, read empiricism. There was another one, which was a book from Bakunin, who was an anarchist philosopher, and I can't remember the book of Schopenhauer that I actually read as well. And and this was in 1 week, and I was also reading relativity at the time and all sorts of shit, So, and that was just to prove a point. Then I could actually recite, because I got a good memory, so I could remember all these things, and I would go and argue with these people and rip them apart, rip them an asshole. And it really, sort of for a youngster, really, it was great for my ego. But and it's a consequence of, had Dad never taken us back to Greece, never did high school there, and lived in that sort of environment to be exposed, because they don't really, the society doesn't really have like jocks and nerds. Basically, you're both. It's considered normal. You're actually considered abnormal in the Greek world if you're just a jock or just a nerd. There's something wrong with you. Where it's normal to be basically both athletic, like I am. I'll go for fucking 26K walks if I've done in the past, so, or play soccer all day or whatever. But at the same time, or lift weights and do all sorts of shit. But at the same time, or go up a mountain or go hunting or stuff like that, which is considered all those jock type things. I love hunting, but but at the same time, I'm a bookworm. But that's normal within the sort of culture that I come from. It's sort of encouraged. It's a normal sort of thing. That's all I can say. So I've been reading shitloads of stuff and I still love reading. I still love researching and understanding things and how they work. As a youngster, I used to rip my toys apart and try to put them back together to work out how they worked. So I've always been an inquisitive mind, trying to work out how things work. I just don't accept what people tell me. And what I've found from experience is what people usually tell me is only part of the truth or none of the truth. So, I've learned to basically be inquisitive about everything. And I think everybody to some extent touches onto the truth in some way. But what they do is they get caught up in just that thing. They think, oh, I've learned, I know things now. And then they go down that pathway and they ignore everything else. I don't do that. I have a tendency of basically going, okay, let me hear the argument. And you probably notice even when people put up arguments that disagree with me, they challenge me. I see it as a challenge. If I can't argue that point that somebody's put up, it means that basically I haven't researched it enough. And I'll go away and actually do additional research. So next time that person asks me, in my youthful days, I would have nailed them. But now I would have basically tried and enlighten them, So that's a different approach. Then it was, childhood sort of ego, young people. We want to basically, we think we can conquer the world and shit like that. And so it's more that. But I don't mind being challenged. I mean, even today, I was on one of Bart's, and one woman was actually challenging me on the N15 isotope, and I said, "Well, hold on," and I actually argued the point, and I argued basically, okay, let's say that, but what about, you've got, from the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany, they've got one of the biggest collections of bones throughout the world from different locations all over the world. So even if one or two or some specimens were problematic in terms of nitrogen 15, or some of the studies, they can't be all, you know. And if there were a lot of plants, as you say, that are lost, because of some issue with the analysis, well, you would have to have high levels of nitrogen 14 for those plants, or plant proteins, or whatever. They're not there. So if they're not there, basically you don't have an argument. So, but I went methodically through and argued the point, but the thing is, I don't mind being challenged like that, because basically it brings out the best in me. If I'm not challenged, it means basically, I'm not basically using my brain. But that's me, that's the way I operate. I know it's a long-winded, but I tend to be, anybody that's come to my sort of site or subscribes to me actually knows I'm very long-winded, and I pull a lot of things together because I see patterns in a lot of things, why they actually emerge or why they happen, So if you go through some of my other videos, you'll see that basically I nuance things, and I see a whole lot of interacting patterns and elements that are in interplay, that bring things about. Things just don't happen for, in a random way. There is some absolute within the relative underlying that force things down a certain path in certain ways, to basically happen. But I'm quite critical of a lot of isms, and the reason why they are is because they are created by humans who are basically, like the rest of us, including myself, dumb monkeys that have very low levels of perception of reality around us, and we straddle this world trying to make sense of things, the best we can. And the ones that actually put a bit more energy in trying to understand it get a bit further, but it doesn't mean even I know all the truths of the world, or would ever know all the truths of the world. So if you're coming for a guru, I'm not that, but I'll try as hard as possible in getting some of the information to a level of detail that can potentially help you or others that subscribe here. That's all I can offer. I hope that helps, or that explains, or the sort of thinking or person that I am. Pig said soup is amazing. Yep. Actually, I'll actually, when I find it, because I don't have it on there, so we cooked this nice little piglet. Oh, got the big head at the end. That was nice. A couple of years back. Need to do that again. It's another comment from Holman. I'm surprised he hasn't passed out yet from all that 5G. Nah, I wouldn't, mate. I wouldn't. You're looking at the wrong picture. It's a misdirect. The sort of hysteria and all that is all a misdirect. The real people are these elites that have got an agenda, and their long-term agenda is they don't need us. That's what their long-term agenda is. They're trying to manage how they're going to transition to a rentier neo-feudal capitalism. That means where they own everything. They don't mind these crises because it actually destroys value and destroys asset values. They've got cheap money that they can access. They can come in and buy all these assets, concentrating more wealth and turning the rest of us into paupers, and having to rent from them. So that's what is a rentier and neo-feudal society, where we work in order just to get fed, kibble. That's the ultimate thing, because basically When you have high technology, the problem is you can't create a surplus anymore. If you don't have workers producing products that they can buy because you've got more and more automation, at some point you're going to get to an inflection point where you can't create enough, profit anymore. Profitability goes to naught nearly. So you've got assets, but they're not returning anything because nobody can actually fucking pay for those goods or services. So this is why they talk about this sort of, social wage and all that, because what they want to do is they want to integrate you. They want to destroy small business and all that, who are the only competitors to them. And they basically want to concentrate everything and then turn you into where they give you the money so you can buy their kibble and basically stay nice and calm and under control. That's the real agenda. The real agenda of the elites, they are scared because they've seen the revolutions of the past and they are scared, but they're greedy. They want everything. But they want it in such a way where they can manage us in bigger cities, where they can congregate us, they can control us, they can feed us what they want and all that. They can give us our social wage and all that, keep us content and happy while they basically sit there as rulers, as the emperors, like the emperors of the past. They've been doing it since the pharaohs. Nothing new, mate. No, nothing conspiratorial, nothing, It's just when the middle class wake up to themselves, they push back and they basically want to tax these people more and want more of that distributed back to us plebs who produce it in the first place. What? Because they take risks in the marketplace, they should get most of the cake. That's their propaganda, telling you, we take risks. Well, what about soldiers who take even bigger fucking risks? We don't lavish them with billions of dollars. So why we're lavishing these pricks who produce nothing? If they were on an island on their own, they would produce zero. They'd have to fucking work for the first time in their life. Hope to see a round table again. Yeah, look, that's up to Bart. He's good value in that regard. But, Hellman, middle class have been decimated in this country and most other countries around the world. And that's the unfortunate reality. These pricks at the top don't give a shit about us, about small little people. That's where the real issue lies. And people like Tristan and people like that are trying to get away, trying to create their own food supply and stuff like that. Good for them, but not everybody can do that. That's the problem. So yeah, it's not looking good. Exactly. It's littered. The place is littered. The genetics are, are basically, the Sicilians are pretty much, yes, in that regard. Yeah, look, I was surprised. I thought I'd probably have a bit of Turkish in me, but I didn't. I thought I would have a bit of other sort of groups in the region, like from sort of the Slavic type people, Southern Slavs or Bulgarian. So I was a bit surprised in that regard, but I think because when after the 1922, there was a lot of transfer of populations. So if you considered yourself Bulgarian, you were sent to Bulgaria. If you considered yourself Greek, you went to Greece. If you considered yourself Turkish, you went, and that was like an ethnic cleansing that happened after 1922, and all these populations sort of shifted. And as a consequence, Turkey ended up with far more mixed people from all these different parts than the either the Slavic or the Greek world and all that. And so because of that ethnic type cleansing in 1922, you ended up with a more homogeneous in a sense. And I think that's probably a factor in it. I can't prove anything, but that's a possible factor. Why? Because I've actually seen other people's as well, like people that are related to me, or people, like in 23andMe, you get the sort of related people, and it seems very similar. We all have this big Greek portion, and then we have all this Italian type, ones, which I've explained the reason why. And you go, oh, and some of them have more or less depending on, which part of Greece they came from, and because there were certain parts that had more colonies in. Like one lady had about 30%. but she came from a region in Greece where the original colonists to Sicily came from, and they actually, that dialect of Greek was the basis for Latin as well. So so it's depends which part. So it's a bit in that context, but it's interesting. It's interesting. I was sort of surprised. In terms of bragging rights for my friends who used to, joke about, oh yeah, I used to say, because I knew my ancestry had come from the southern part of the Peloponnese, with the War of Liberation, because a number of my great-grandparents were in the War of Liberation, were like officers in the Liberation Army. And so, and I mean, nowadays, many of them, like one of my uncles was a minister in one of the governments over there. And so I've got a long history of, my ancestors basically being involved in rebellion or being involved in fighting in guerrilla forces, or and so coming from those regions. So I always thought, maybe, I've got a bit of Spartan in me, and my friends used to sort of joke with me and all that, but then I did the 23andMe, and oops, there's a bit of truth in that. So yeah, so I was quite surprised. Let's put it that way. Yes, lots of jocks here in the UK are smart and athletic, while others are considered jabs. Yeah, look, different cultures. There's a lot of reasons. But mate, to some extent, we are wage slaves. They just want to have a bit more control over us, so we don't push back as much. They saw what happened in past history. That's the problem. So you're welcome, mate. I recently started supplementing with pure colostrum powder. Noticed faster workout recovery, improved quality of sleep. Do you have any experience in supplementing colostrum? No, I don't. No personal, but I do know it's good. Lactoferrin as well is much higher in it, and also in generally raw milk you'll get lactoferrin, so you'll get some benefit of that. But obviously colostrum is much more potent in that regard. But I mean, if you need it, good idea. If it depends on, I mean, if you're doing a lot of physical work, you're tearing down muscle a lot, it probably is beneficial, useful. If you can get access to raw milk, even better, that's good as well. But obviously raw milk, because the levels, like the first milk, which is the colostrum type thing, can vary, in the milk supply. If it's like spring, those sort of, it'll have far more in it than in other periods of the year. So, but when it comes to colostrum, also quality is important, because some of the fats can be damaged. That's where my only concern comes with, with the actual, that part of things. So, sort of, and also I've heard of protein folding issues as well, but I haven't actually seen any good science, so I can't tell you either way. It's one of those things. We haven't got the research, so I don't want to speculate, because that doesn't give you any value. If it's working for you, good. If you've got a good source, which is sort of grass-fed, comes from a good source, and it's been properly produced and stored and all that, good for you. I hope it, yeah, they're getting definitely ruined. I mean, since the 70s, they decimated the middle class to a large extent, and now they're literally completing the job. That's the unfortunate thing. See you, mate. Daniel, enjoy your sleep. database weren't too good early on. Halfling English in the first check. Yep. Updated result, 90%. Yep. Yeah. Look, mine actually showed initially, it actually showed, certain numbers, like the Greek level was down to 75%. And since then, it's sort of, I had even more Italian than then, and then it sort of cleared up and corrected. Recently, they have improved, but I still have arguments over the Sicilian side of things in southern Italy, because that was predominant Greek, genes in that area. So I still think that they're wrong in that part. And yeah, it's just unfortunate that you can't really do much about it, because just the way it goes in that regard. Guys, it's about 3 hours. It's nearly 11 o'clock. I've really enjoyed this. Loved it. Thanks for being around. Whoever hasn't liked or subscribed, please do. All the support helps. Keeps me viable, keeps me going. You don't know what YouTube's going to do in the long run. They could be potentially culling out places that don't have enough subscribers. So it's really important that you guys keep supporting me. It's the only way I can keep supporting you guys. If I'm around. If I'm not, that's how it goes. Look, I would say anywhere between 6.5 to 8 hours, and it would depend on a number of factors. If you've got more repair to do, you need more sleep. If you've got less repair to do, you don't need as much sleep. It really comes down to that, and your circadian sort of signaling, what time you're going and stuff like that. It's a bit more complicated. When you're on next time, ask me again, and we'll get into much deeper and meaningful stuff about sleep, because I've already helped a few people in regards to night shift people and all sorts of things. So that's a long conversation, and we're running out of time. So, yep, I'll definitely just bring it up again, please. Thank you. New Zealand pastured fed. Yep, good. That's one of the best. Yeah, you couldn't do any. Yeah, good for you. You're welcome. G'day, mate. Good to see you. Yeah, thanks, mate. I will enjoy my sleep. I always do. Harriet, good to see you, mate. Take care. And I thought you were going to go out and soak your feet. Look, if you're basically there's a lot of factors. Blue light's an issue. And I'm going to do something on light and stuff like that, but also I'm going to do one before I do my, the big ones, which are all going to be sciencey. I'm going to also do a number of things that you can actually do, because, talk about science is one thing, but actually doing things is also very important. We don't get enough to do things like that. Thanks, mate. Thank you as well, and good night. Thanks, mate. Look, it's had a great time. Enjoyed it. Come back, please, and ask more questions about different things. And I will do one on specific things to do. It's like the one that I will upload shortly before I go to bed, which will be the one on the corona thing, some of the strategies, things that you can do. But I do want to do one on sort of blue light and things you can do. So like there are special light bulbs you can get. There are a couple of things, and they're not as expensive as people think. So there are a lot of expensive solutions that people that have got monetized sort of sites and channels that want to promote and sell you things that cost thousands of dollars and stuff like that. You don't need that shit. You can actually get light bulbs for a couple of bucks and put them in that do the job, that are really good for that sort of thing, for your circadian rhythms and other little strategies that are not as expensive. I mean, these sort of glasses I got from Hong Kong, guess how much they cost? $2. They come out of China and all that, you know. They're not the best, you know. They're not the best thing, but at the end of the day, you know, why pay $50-$60 where you're only getting, you know, a very slight additional benefit? You know, and that's the problem. You know, there was a lot of people out there pushing stuff, product and all that. You know, I mean, I got a day job, as you know. I'm not into that. You know, I'm more about getting the information out, helping you guys. That's all I'm interested in. And as I said, and I like to be challenged. So ask controversial questions. I don't mind. I want controversial questions. I want to be pushed, because that's the only way I grow and you guys grow, you know, because we grow together. That's the whole idea. Anyway, take care. Good night or good morning or good day, wherever you are. Please like and subscribe, and see you tomorrow in my regular time slot of 12 p.m. noon, Australian Eastern Standard Time, for my regular sort of live stream after baths. See you guys. Take care.